All right. I just have a few comments I want to make about GST, HST. You find the slides and your textbook and whatnot available to you. And I just want to mainly talk about where some of the mistakes get made and some interesting aspects of it. I guess from my point of view, it might be, I consider them somewhat interesting. So the first thing I want to talk about is where we see mistakes or issues with the GST, general sales tax, harmonized sales tax. I guess maybe I should point out or remind you that a harmonized sales tax is when the province has worked with the federal government so that it has been combined, the provincial sales tax and the federal sales tax, which is the general sales tax. If you're in a province that has not combined, then you will see a separate provincial sales tax. The issues tend to be the same in any case. And the issues generally wind up being connected with small business operations, entrepreneurs, single activity people who aren't tax sophisticated, or for that matter, accounting/business sophisticated. And one of the first mistakes that we see is that people don't register. They start doing business, you have to register, as the slides note, if you go over 30,000, et cetera, et cetera. And people just, they're thinking of other things. They're not tax oriented, so they don't register. We see this a lot. And we see cash flow issues that they collect the sales tax, but as always, small businesses, small operations have cash crunch. There's always a cash crunch, typically with the startup operation with the small activity, and people get careless, and so they collect the sales tax and they use it. They use it for other expenses, and the time comes they're supposed to send it to the government and they don't have the money. And this happens a great deal. People don't realize that if they incorporate their business after they've been operating for a period of time, you have to get a new account. So you can't just use the account you've been using as a sole proprietorship or partnership. You have to get a new account. There comes confusion if you operate in more than one province. These again are the places that we see errors all the time. So you need to help. Like, there's no question that particularly startup and small business activities need a lot of help. And another area that can get quite complex is benefits for employees. And this is where the small business owner, if they have any benefit plans for their employees, they are responsible for the GST, HST aspects of those benefits. And that can get quite complex. And it's unlikely that a small business person who's not sophisticated in accounting or tax is going to be able to do this without some help. And one of the big places that we always see problems, not just limited to GST, HST, is documents. People have to document what they do. That documentation can make all the difference in the world when CRA raises questions or raises issues. And remember, the burden of proof is on the taxpayer. This isn't a criminal procedure. And to some extent, it only makes sense. It's the taxpayer who has the records. So they're the ones who have to demonstrate that what they're doing is appropriate. And it gets interesting. I mean, it can actually, this whole sales tax thing can get quite picky. We have the digital services issue. Whether you realize it or not, if you are buying digital services from a non, and where we would see this a great deal would be international. So if you're buying digital services from, for example, Netflix, gee, I wonder if any of you out there have a Netflix account. Is this possible? All right. Technically, if the non-resident isn't registered, and frequently they're not, now this is starting to change, that the provinces are working at making these international companies get registered, you're supposed to self-assess. You're supposed to pay GST, HST. Right? Now, we'll take some guesses at how many people are actually doing that, eh? All right, but Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, some of these things, and again, a lot of these companies now are starting to register, so it won't be as big a deal, and you'll start seeing HST, GST on your bills. What about Airbnb? Any of you out there that perhaps have been involved with an Airbnb activity, again, that is subject to GST, HST. Whichever happens to apply. Now, by the way, in case you weren't aware of it, from the Airbnb count towards your RSP limit. The count is earned income. Just as an aside, when we're talking about the Airbnb, what about things like Uber, Lyft? Now, I believe Uber has started to register. So again, if you take an Uber, and again, I'm quite certain that you guys are doing this. If you take an Uber, you may have seen that on your credit statement, the GST or HST as appropriate is there. Lyft provides their drivers with information, but again, all these different things are subject to tax, but in a lot of cases, people just don't see it. It's not big numbers, but cumulatively for the government, it is big numbers. And let's talk about Bitcoin, just for the fun of it, okay? What is happening there? I mean, arguably getting involved with these things, it's a barter transaction. Depends on what they actually are and what they're considered to be. Like, so you've got all these different things that might go on in the internet and in that digital world that are becoming bigger and bigger issues. And you need to keep an eye on this because things will start developing. They'll continue to develop. If you pay attention to the news, which by the way, you should be doing, just, so that you see the issues, you see that these issues are coming up all the time. And the issue of taxing Facebook and taxing Google and all the rest of these things. So we'll continue to see this develop, and it's a very dynamic area. So it's something that you really should pay attention and be sensitive to.